This podcast was produced for educational purposes only. The subject matter discussed was carefully selected by the full-timers as we believe the subject matter is relevant and timely. Furthermore, the video clips used in this presentation were taken from Singapore's top story and dwnews.com as credible and reliable information sources.
Hello, my name is Marat, and today we are going to talk about something very popular nowadays, and we call it inflation. I have invited three of my group mates to this podcast. Here we go.
Today we have Pesindu, Sabina, and Ilya in our studio, and today we are going to talk about inflation. So guys, can you tell me something about inflation?
In one sentence, money basically loses its value.
The inflation is the description of money. I think the majority of people who know what is inflation can define it with these words. But if we can say in specific word, the inflation is an illusion that calls to us our economic system. When employees increase our salaries, it doesn't mean that we have a lot of money, more money, because the prices of our goods in stores are increasing too. So this is illusion that affects to us.
Somewhat yes. To my knowledge, inflation is basically an increase in prices of goods or services we buy avail over time within the country we live in.
You guys know a lot about it, so next question would be quite popular nowadays because the question is, why do we have our salaries not getting increased but the prices of goods are?
I think that our employers can afford to raise our salaries, but I don't know really about the topic.
If our salary is not getting increased but the prices of our goods are, people don't have indication of their salaries. This means that inflation is increasing every year, but the people's salary not.
And the next question would be, which continent or the country has one of the biggest inflation in the world?
I think Europe was hit strong by inflation after the war in Ukraine.
In my opinion, it is hard to say what continent have the biggest inflation in this year, but to talk about what country have the biggest inflation nowadays, it's much easier. So I have found that the Turkey has the biggest number of inflation in this year. It is about 80%. That's insane. I can't imagine that.
Based on my research, I see it must be Turkey within high inflation rate as first quarter of 2022.
Anyways, do you think we should fight inflation or no?
Who does like inflation? If our salaries were increased, maybe it wasn't such a problem.
Of course, I don't like the inflation, but I think it must be in our world. It seems like the inflation makes a kind of balance in our economic system and serves as kind of indicator to us to understand of situation of economic and how to deal with.
For me, it's absolutely yes.
You guys have such crazy opinions about inflation. Inflation, though, has a good side but also a bad one. I wonder how inflation hits every community here in Finland and all over the globe. So, on the other hand, we managed to ask someone who has a background on this subject. Take a look.
Inflation in the countries that use the euro has hit a record high of 8.1%. The figure for May shows how life continues to get more expensive for many Europeans. Inflation has been rising for the last year, getting further and further away from the European Central Bank's target of 2%, as you'll see here. Originally, it was supply problems caused by the pandemic that kicked off the climb, but war in Ukraine has caused food and fuel prices to rise, pushing up inflation even further.
Part of the problem for the European Central Bank is that, of course, these high prices for oil, for food, also cut very much into consumer disposable incomes. Consumers have to spend more on energy, and hence they have less to spend on other things. So put differently, this is a shock that drives up prices, but it also probably hits economic growth, which now at the moment is stagnating. And the European Central Bank has to find a balance between these two things: higher prices, but slower growth or even stagnation and recession risks. So they'll probably decide to go ahead with rate hikes, but not be very aggressive to not kill the economy outright.
It seems like inflation has a positive and also negative impact on people's life and economy. Let's find out.
You've probably been hearing a lot of this.
Interest rate hikes to petrol price increases.
Bad news, though, for borrowers and families.
The biggest jump in consumer prices in 2 decades.
Inflation is not a scary word. Right now, it's been getting a little out of control here and around the world. Inflation means we're spending more. Our economy is growing and growth is good.
It's spending that you would do every single day. The things that have the largest weighting in the consumer price index are things like food, housing, utilities, education, and health.
Inflation has a negative side. It affects people's life dramatically. If I need it, I'll just buy even if the price is expensive, but because it's of course, yeah, I'm looking to buy it for the best quality. So whenever I buy groceries, I usually look for discounts. Unfortunately, there is nothing. But to fight inflation, you can put your money into a bank or maybe invest in something which is increasing in its prices.
If you are really looking for a place to park your money in the short term, then, well, high interest bank accounts is something that one can consider, right? A lot of these banks, especially our local banks, are offering those higher interest rate accounts if you meet the requirements. Other alternatives would be like your treasury bills. But I'll say that if you are investing for the long term, for example, for retirement, for funding of your children's education, for an objective that you want to achieve in the next 10, 15 years' time, well, the stock market, equities is still the best place to park your money, because equities has shown itself over history that it will always beat inflation. But in the short term, you have got to bear with the volatility.
I think that the key point here is that inflation was running too high for a bit too long, and there's a need to try and curb it. And if there's a price to pay, hopefully it is a mild recession, and then we can get on to a more healthy phase of expansion with lower inflation.
For now, our podcast is over. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Bye!
We chose to talk about inflation simply because we find it very timely, experienced and relevant, especially nowadays that the entire world experiences its apparent impact in all forms of economic structure and conditions.
Obviously, we are all part of it, hence, we deal with it even without knowing it. So our team, full-timers, feel that everyone should have a personal touch and awareness on this matter and do your part to mitigate its negative impact by all means. On the other hand, as experts say, on the bright side, we also care to see and acknowledge its positive effects associated with economic growth and progress.
I think that in Ukraine, one more time.
I forgot. Wait a minute. Biggest. Sorry.
Quite interesting. What do you guys... Yeah, those countries have a really insane inflation.
Never mind. For now, our podcast. I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Where's the buy?
Oh my god. Inflation According to people, inflation has a negative side. Hello, what's up?